And frankly, if the Tory party don't look back over the last 3 or 4 years, understand how their behaviour and their actions have led to this catastrophic defeat, and get themselves back on their feet as soon as possible and show that they can be a competent and serious opposition, that will be entirely a fault of their own making.
Right, let's start with what you make of Labour's 3 days in power so far, those all-important first impressions. This all started with a walk up Downing Street being embraced and cheered by supporters. So what have Claire and Ed made of it all? Claire, you know Keir Starmer very well. Is he more comfortable as Prime Minister than Leader of the Opposition, or the other way around?
He always wanted to be Prime Minister. So even when that looked like a really long way away, when we were kind of well behind in the polls when he first started, you could just tell he was doing this because he wanted to be Prime Minister, because of the changes that he would like to bring about for the positive in the country. And I just thought at the podium at Downing Street, at the press conference, and of course meeting the leaders of our nations, he just looked like he was more than ready to do this job. It felt like it was purposeful, good contrast with what we'd had before. So I think the public, if you like, it may not be the euphoric scenes that we saw in 1997, but it does feel like a bit of a sense of a relief and a good contrast to what we've just had.
I suppose the difference here is that, Claire, if we're just talking about the stuff outside Downing Street, is that because this is an election rather than, someone just, the Conservative Party constantly, spinning the bottle and saying, right now it's your turn, and then someone turns up outside Downing Street, there is always going to be a degree of euphoria. And I think that was very apparent, really, when you compare it to previous prime ministers that we've had. We haven't elected them, but we've had them. The mood was definitely different.
Yeah, and I think people are pretty savvy about the scale of the challenges. I don't think they're expecting a new leader or a new government to come along and immediately solve everything. Like, we know our problems are deep, but it just felt like the mood had lifted on Friday. It felt like it was a strong start, and I think people will be willing to give this new government the benefit of the doubt for some time. And then I thought, as the weekend went on, we had these quite interesting appointments, very non-party political. I thought they absolutely have got the authority to be very partisan if they wanted. Bringing in Patrick Vallance, James Timpson, not party political people. I just thought it showed they really want to deliver for people, and they're serious about putting the government back in the hands of serving the public again.
Ed, we've been asking our listeners what they have made, what their first impressions have been, and competent is a word that comes out a lot. Adults back in the room has come into. What have you made of what you've seen so far? And it's only been a couple of days.
Well, I think he's had a very workmanlike start. It's pretty refreshing. He does look the part. I always thought that Keir Starmer would look like a better prime minister than he does look like a leader of the opposition. So I thought his press conference was very impressive. He was across the detail. There's been a blizzard of announcements. I was sort of totting them up this morning, writing my introduction for my lunchtime show at 1:00.
Yes.
You've had the First Minister's tour. You've got the Metro Mayor's tour coming up. You've had the border security control. You've had prisoners' release. You've had NIMBYism. All these announcements being made. I think there are about 7 or 8 quite significant announcements. So it does look very businesslike. I mean, my word of caution would obviously be when reality bites. So it's all very well to say that you're going to build on the grey belt and get house building, but the minute your housing targets meet the intransigence of local councils, we'll see what happens then. We'll see how the right-wing press greet the release of prisoners, early release of prisoners, which may be an essential thing to do because of prison overcrowding, but it won't stop the newspapers saying it's terrible and people are going to be murdered on the streets. So at the moment, things are going very well, but I don't expect it all to be plain sailing. And of course, he may well have got us through on penalties, and he may well have got Lewis Hamilton the British Grand Prix, but he didn't get Emma Raducanu into the quarterfinals. He doesn't walk on water.
No, of course he doesn't. Of course, I'm quite interested actually about how you felt watching those pictures on Friday of Keir Starmer and his wife embracing a lot of people outside Downing Street. Did you allow yourself a little smile? Did you feel optimistic, Ed?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Tories didn't deserve to win the election, and I say that as a Conservative, still taking the Conservative whip. And I think we need, obviously, to regroup and rebuild, and we're going to talk about that later. And I think, it is refreshing to have a new group of ministers with energy and desire. I felt, funny enough, I was particularly emotional, weirdly, about David Lammy becoming Foreign Secretary. There were lots of people saying that he might not make it. And I just thought, that brought home to me. I know David a bit. It brought home to me that if you've had 14 years in opposition, and the Tories are going to find this out, the frustration of knocking your head against a brick wall and being utterly powerless, to being within 24 hours walking into one of the great offices of state and immediately being able to affect the difference. That's what a lot of them will be thinking. They'll be very excited, very enthused, and I thought it was rather lovely, to be honest.
That's interesting. You talk about the cabinet, Claire. I want to ask you about that. Actually, we've had a tiny bit of kind of people's raised eyebrows over, some people who've been brought back, Douglas Alexander and Jackie Smith. What did you make of those appointments?
I thought it was really encouraging. On the whole, if you look at the cabinet that's been appointed, pretty much it's the shadow cabinet that Starmer had appointed in opposition. So with a couple of exceptions, it looks like a very stable team who've had the ability to start to form the relationships, form an idea of what they want to do, and then they've been appointed into these posts. And I think that's quite deliberate. I think Starmer wants to get away from the churn that we've had, and he's put people there on merit. He's also appointed, as you say, some former pretty serious politicians, but not into the cabinet necessarily, but into those quite big posts like Jackie Smith, who I understand who will be at education, working on skills. I mean, as someone who cares passionately about our skills, particularly for young adults and for adults into their working life, I think it's brilliant that we've got somebody of such experience. So I thought it was a pretty smart move that he's really drawing on the talent and the experience that he's got available. And I think it will strengthen those departments, not diminish them.
Just finally on this, we've been quite impressed. If I mean, maybe it's just an obvious thing, and maybe it's compared to what went before, at the kind of the slickness of the social media, the messaging. Everyone looks incredibly smart. Everyone's walking in the right direction. There's no one's falling over. It's all, and it's, I suppose maybe they've just been waiting for this for a long time, Claire, and they've rehearsed it. But we have been very struck by how smooth this all is.
Yes, and I have to say that the Labour Party HQ behind the scenes, and I can't name names, but the party staff know who they are utterly brilliant at this. There's a reason why the letters don't fall down at our conference. There's a reason why, sorry, Ed, but there's a reason why some of that runs very slickly. And also we haven't always until recently had the money to do those things, but we have a very, very professional, experienced staff team, very loyal team that have been there for many years. But you also have in Starmer somebody who absolutely prepares for the things that he needs to do. And do you know why I think that is I think he's had to earn where he's got to. Nobody has ever given him anything for free. He has basically earned his way up to the top to be Prime Minister. Therefore, he doesn't take anything for granted. He prepares well for everything. And it absolutely shows in these days that we've seen a really smooth and prepared operation. And I think that's what we need.
Ed, we're going to talk about the future of the Tories now, but just, are you embarrassed a bit for your party? Do you feel a bit shown up that almost everyone you speak to is saying time was up for the Tories, there were shambles, they couldn't organise anything, and then you see this new, and of course there's a honeymoon period, of course it's new to them, of course they're coming in hungry and lean and ready because they've been waiting for it. But the contrast is very, very stark. Does that bother you? I mean, you're very nice about David Lammy and being optimistic, but there must be part of you that just, if that was my team, I'd be thinking, God, we're being shown up here.
No, I've been embarrassed for the last 5 years. I mean, come on. I mean, do me a favour.
Oh.
Liz Truss, Partygate. I mean, come on. This is just the icing on the cake. I mean, it's quite interesting. I've been waiting for the kind of new Labour moment, the independence of the Bank of England, but really, we kind of saw it over the weekend. It is quite clear that they've been preparing for months for a series of announcements to show that they were in control, in charge, going in a certain direction, and it's impressive and it's good for the country, which I like. And frankly, if the Tory party don't look back over the last 3 or 4 years, understand how their behaviour and their actions have led to this catastrophic defeat, and get themselves back on their feet as soon as possible and show that they can be a competent and serious opposition, that will be entirely a fault of their own making.
Well, let's talk about the future of the Conservatives, where they're going to go, what direction they can go in, and under whom. We've had lots of people on Times Radio sort of thinking about this. Here are 2 former and 1 serving Tory MP who've appeared on the station in the past 24 hours.
I don't think there's political space for where the current crop of MPs want to be, which is on the centre-left SDP side of politics, the old SDP. They are centre-left politicians, and that's where Labour is.
I think we should begin to realise that this headlong rush to the right should be corrected.
I didn't meet a single person in the thousands of doors I knocked on over the election campaign who didn't want to control migration, who didn't want to lower taxation, who didn't want us to tackle some of these cultural issues in our society.
So Marcus Fish says go right, Giles Watling says go left, Kevin Hollinrake told us the Conservatives should keep on keeping on. Only he is the person who's still an MP. And this is a problem, isn't it? Because there's the threat of reform on the right. Labour are occupying the centre, but quite a few Tory MPs are happy centrists like you. It's not just a technical debate. This is about the soul of the party. How do you go about determining what that is and then starting from there?
Well, there'll be look. A lot of this is quite predictable, and it happened in 1997. The Tories will go off the deep end, make an emergency kind of leadership appointment, which is undoubtedly will be the wrong person. And they will condemn themselves to 4 years of wilderness in the opposition, opposing the wrong things. I thought Danny Finkelstein put it very well on Times Radio a couple of days ago. He said, are the Tories more likely to win back Surrey Heath or Hartlepool? And that really crystallises the decision. The fact is that we're all looking over our shoulders at reform, thinking reform is going to eat our lunch. Hello, there are 72 Lib Dem MPs now. There's potentially a centre, even a centre-right party in the south of England that could replace the Conservatives. Unless you start showing your middle-class base vote that you are there for them and that you will oppose Labour competently, you're going to go nowhere. And that means, for example, VAT on school fees may be a perfectly legitimate issue for us to attack the Labour government on. But it also means that we embrace and accept some reforms, much needed reforms that Labour are going to put through. Sensible, intelligent opposition involves not opposition for the sake of opposition, but targeted and effective critique of the government. And that's what we should be doing with a moderate centre-right leader.
And actually, there's this notion that the economics of the country is kind of centre-left. And maybe there is, particularly in the south, a centre-right social conservatism. But you've got to be both of those things, haven't you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, immigration is a very important issue, no question about it, and people are very concerned about it, and will be perfectly within our rights to criticise the Labour government if border security control doesn't work out, they don't stop the boats or have an impact on the boats, or if levels of immigration remain very high, although Labour will remind us about our own high levels of immigration. But it doesn't stop us also talking about issues that matter to everyone in this country, whether it's reform of the health service, quality in our schools, and economic growth. So those are the kind of mainstream issues that people want to talk about. I don't agree with Kevin Hollinrake that we need to go down some weird culture war. I mean, obviously, the whole trans issue was embarrassing for Keir Starmer, but I think things are moving on pretty rapidly there. We want to be in the centre, talking about the things that matter to everyday people in their everyday lives.
So just on the leaders, we'll also get Claire's view on this as well. But Ed, the leaders in the Times with this is from favourite to least favourite. Who would you put a tenner on? Who will it be? Who should it be? Kemi Badenoch, Tom Tugendhat, Robert Jenrick, Priti Patel, James Cleverly, Suella Braverman, Victoria Atkins.
Well, I think weirdly, Victoria Atkins might emerge as the kind of candidate of the centre ground. I think Kemi Badenoch has a huge amount of talent, but I think that there are big question marks over her, whether she will work effectively with her colleagues. and she can be quite sort of forceful. I don't know what the right adjective to use is. She can kind of go off on one and get herself into trouble. I mean, she tends to have these big spats, and normally she comes out quite well from them. But I think Victoria Atkins comes across as kind of moderate and reasonably charismatic. I don't think the rest of them are particularly effective. I mean, Tom Tugendhat is, for some reason, everyone has been talking about Tom Tugendhat as being the leader of our party for the last 2 years. I've never worked out why.
Oh, what a burn.
That is a good burn.
Oh.
A good burn. Also from one centrist dad to another as well. That's centrist, blue on blue, centrist dad warfare. I love it. Claire, who would Keir Starmer least like to be a leader and most like to be a leader of the Tories, do you think?
I don't think it matters too much to Keir Starmer.
Oh, the
Like,
confidence
another burn.
the confidence of a massive majority comes right out there.
Honestly, because like over the weekend, I looked for signs of humility in the Conservatives, and I actually think they should take their cue from Sunak, who apologised. I thought was the Rishi Sunak that actually, if we'd had a bit more of that, might not have come so unstuck. And I don't really think it's just about the left and right spectrum. I think it is about looking really long and hard about what the Conservative Party stands for now, because a lot of what I got coming up from people wasn't really about left-right positioning. It was much more about feeling totally let down, totally betrayed over Partygate, and then people lining up to kind of defend some of the lies that we were told, and then just not delivering for people. And I think what Starmer did in opposition, actually, and what Labour did, was that we looked really long and hard at ourselves and did quite a good, quick, rapid review of what we had done wrong, and then set our course to get back to being ready for government. At the moment, I don't think any of the candidates that I've seen are having that hard conversation, but maybe that's what we've got to see to come in the coming days and weeks.